I said, let me read you a quote. His quote says, talking about AI, I quote, more profound than fire or electricity or anything that we've done in the past. I've got my good friend Joe Petrone with me. Joe, welcome to the show. We've been wanting to do this for a while. Are you in agreement with Mr. Pachai that AI is going to be, I quote, more profound than fire or electricity or anything that we have done in the past?
Mas, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, more profound than carbon, all of the elements on the periodic table.
Oxygen, the whole deal. This is gonna go. But is he hyperbolic? What do you make of it?
I love the question. We sit in an interesting space with the distinct privilege, and maybe in sometimes sometimes it's a curse to talk with some of the brightest people that are engaged in the space. We've got distinguished engineers that we're engaged with, right? Fellows.
Yes.
We've worked at we've literally been in hundreds of companies and talked to some of the smartest people, even at the C level and also at the engineering level. I find it an interesting question because often the question circles around, are we headed in the direction of a utopia or dystopia? So I really actually like the flavor that this question has spun into. It actually reminds me of a conversation I had with kind of a mind mover. I had breakfast with an aeronautical engineer by trade, transitioned into a C-level corporate trainer, and he's 3 decades in. By the way, he's also has a degree in divinity, so he's often thinking, where do we come from, etc.
Polymath, yeah.
The conversation with him, he wanted to know what my perspective was on artificial intelligence and how far along we've come, and the conversation with him spawned this very interesting discussion on what's different about this than any other technology or invention that man has come up with. And in his viewpoint, this is the first time that man is creating something that creates, which in and of itself is incredibly profound, right? Most of the things that we create can do, can potentially read, can analyze, can provide information. But this is the creation by man. In his view, man was created, he believes, in a certain way, in a certain image. And we have been given the ability to create. Now, you can argue where that came from, et cetera, but it's kind of built into our DNA, if you will. And this is actually man creating something that creates. Amazing thought and concept.
He's not that far off from this philosopher I read, who says he was not referring to the AI movement. He was talking about how we came, and he said we went from this the Darwinian Homo habilis to Homo sapiens, and he says when we became Homo faber, man the maker, if you will, where we got really good with tools.
Love it, yeah. So we'll start with repeating one of the things that you said, which is create, right? Man began and we created fire and the wheel and many things. So now you move on and we've matured to the next stage, which is this is man, the creator of a creator. Okay. Incredibly profound. So the answer to the first question is I agree with it. I mean, and it's so much seems like hyperbole. But when you look at what was taking place, if we went back to say the 80s and 90s, we were in an entirely different world, and one that change still existed and it was accelerating, but they were step changes that were taking place. Right, you remember the advent of from a communication standpoint, the IVR.
Moved forward. That was a big.
They're huge. And you had the ability to now queue calls and queue contacts, if you will. You remembered CRMs, right? These are just So I remember actually I'm working at Aon Insurance, and we're doing a startup back in the day, and multiple technologies had changed, and database management was getting huge, and we were working on Paradox back in the day, and we had a Fujitsu switch. I mean, these are names. Right? This brings you back to where we were. I mean, and the folks that were working in this center were actually handwriting the things on paper, and we were actually developing a system for them to be able to actually put it into a system, and to train them to take those step changes was significant. And we had a need to actually help them to also increase production. In fact, in order to stay alive in this specific environment, we needed to increase production by 3.5. So I had to take my time. You got a deep breath when you're talking major step change like that, 3.5 times the production we were at. I had to take them through the math in a whiteboarding session. That kind of change brings massive amounts of stress to people. So you slowly bring the team along. But this is still step change. When I look at the change that we were doing, it was in one piece of the business. This isn't across the enterprise. It wasn't across the entire industry, and it wasn't across every business. So what change that we're actually moving to right now, much more, and we've heard it parallel to the Industrial Revolution, where we went from farming to what we see currently. That's happening again. And so that kind of change is being digested throughout the entire organization. The thing is, I was somewhat comfortable pitching to the team where we needed to go because I had a vision. We'd been there before. We had done some step changes in the past. But now all of the leaders are thrown up in the air. Everyone's in chaos.
Exactly. And what you just said just made me think about, I read an article a few weeks ago, and it was somewhat pessimistic about tech. And we both work in this space. So let me see if you can be the prosecution or the defense attorney for tech. And the premise of this whole thing is tech comes out, makes all kinds of big promises about things will be cheaper, better, faster, what have you. And then it use their words, it turns out to be a scam. They brought up, how streaming was going to fix cable, and we were right back to basically there's just cable now, a worse version of it with apps you got to exit out of, all being bundled. We're just, and it's more expensive, all of that. He went Uber was going to fix cabs. I got to tell you, I was in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago, waiting an hour for an Uber as a bunch of cabs because I was at a Salesforce conference. So I got in a cab. I left. I was gonna bond with some of my younger team members, and I just got in a cab and off I go. Airbnbs. I can go on and on. So one of the things that concern me as you talk about this change is that we are getting transformational change in technology. I feel like every month.
Yep.
But I don't know anyone who's listening to my voice who thinks they're getting transformational change in the real world or at work. And it's like that train is not stopping. So when I hear the CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the world say this, I think he's right that they're probably going to produce pieces of technology and solutions that can do all kinds of revolutionary things. Whether that impacts us as much as fire and all of that is not up to him, right? Like that's I think a lesson that gets lost here. So I guess help me unpack. One, do you agree that tech has failed, and as you think about your response, how do you think it's going to impact us going forward? As we're now in the next one.
It's there's a lot there to chew on. As always, the deep side of the pool with you. I appreciate it. So yeah, the first is yes, and we'll continue to fail our way to success. Right?
Continue to fail our way to success.
We
That's
will.
awesome.
We will. We're gonna fail up. So we continue to see the vision cast about everything will be simple, effortless, and perfect. We've heard that since since the 90s, right? Remember the discussion about omni-channel. How long have we talked about omni-channel?
Oh yeah.
It doesn't even still exist at this point. The ability to go in and get the exact same experience and start where you were in a previous channel.
I couldn't get it within phone call and email. Like I
That's right.
couldn't even get it sometimes within the same phone call. Like I called 2 days ago, and now I want to pick up where I am, and I can't get that. So but yeah, we've been talking about omnichannel. You're right,
Yeah.
for well over a decade now.
Sometimes that's you being king. Sometimes you can't get that right. Yeah,
Exactly.
80% of the time you are. I need to follow you. I'm going to sign up for whatever you're signed up for. I We're promised it, by the way, with the next technology as well, quantum. Right, quantum's supposed to solve all of our problems, cancer, every problem that mankind has, and based on if history repeats itself, none of the technologies that we're developing will solve all of our problems, right? And I think that's actually one of the things that we're engaged in really thoughtful discussions with leaders about. I mean, I was out at a large insurer recently, and we're talking about the them deploying conversational artificial intelligence, right? This has been on for some time.
Yep.
And there's still a desire to plug and play. Most understand that you're going to need to do some integrations. They talk about what APIs are available, but the net is they don't want to develop a center of excellence to actually continue to improve this. They want to
build it
in the front, and that's it, right? And the reality is, if you want to solve issues, and actually, if you're solutioning for excellence, and you're solutioning for brand, and you're solutioning for service, that's what is critical. You have to build it. You have to know you're going to invest in it, and then you have to continually provide maintenance to it ongoing. But probably the best example of this is an organization we did some work for, and their goal was service, right? And I happen to be a customer, and so I got to test the system, if you will. And this was an organization that provided high-end audio equipment, and I had a unit that broke, and so I picked the phone up, and I'm old school. I called. A lot of people aren't doing that these days. That's what I did. I reached a human being that was engaged with technology in the background. The human being greeted me by name. I had said nothing at this point. They said, "Hi, Mr. Petrone. Yeah, are you?" And they continued, "Are you calling about your level 50s or level 70s?" Because I had two things I'd purchased that were registered from them. So they've got the back end serving up information, right? And I said, "Hello, yes." And I said the 50s. So now I've said 3 words. They said, "Is it by chance the mid-range that you're having an issue with on these?" I said, "Yes." Now count the words. I have 6 words in, roughly. All right. And I said, "It is the mid-range." Well, we can send another. Those are typical issue when folks call. We can send another set out. They'd be there by Friday. There's 4 screws to take out. I know your address. It's X. Is this correct? Yes. They said, "Would you be able to do that yourself, or would would you need notes? Would you need information for someone to actually come and assist?" I said, "I can." And they said, "Okay, great. We'll send those out. Is there anything else we can help you with?" And I've seen 10 words roughly.
Wow.
And received. That's how well. Yeah. And, yeah. Wow. I got off the phone shocked. I got off the phone maybe a little worried, right?
That they have a camera in your house.
Not like they were. It took a couple minutes to actually process that. Yes, they weren't in the room.
If I were you, I would have taken these pieces of equipment and smashed them in the driveway, because there's definitely a camera. They're watching everything I'm doing. Yeah, that is the point I want to double click into this whole thing of that magic didn't happen as a result of they're using, by and large, correct me if I'm wrong, the same technology that many other organizations are doing, and somehow we're getting a different outcome. So, Joe, we're gonna, and if you're just tuning in, I'm talking to Joe Petrone. He's a business and leadership executive for many years, CEO roles, all that. You can find him on LinkedIn. But I want the folks to get to know you a little bit. So I'm gonna throw you a question. What in your personal or professional life do you spend an inordinate amount of time doing? So to buy you some time, I'll go first. Me, it's around food and my smoker. I will smoke ribs for 8 hours and eat it all in 4 minutes. Uh, and people would just go, and I spend an inordinate amount of time when I make spaghetti and meatballs. I can't find any good ones in Oklahoma City. I get the tomatoes. You
We'll have
gotta
you over. We'll have you.
you gotta blend it. You gotta cook down the water. Like I spend hours and hours. I've joked that if I didn't like good food so much, I'll have so much free time to do other things. So, what in your life will people find? Man, you spend an inordinate amount of time doing insert then
Yeah.
here.
I spend, and it's I spend an inordinate amount of time getting quiet. Honestly, a few hours a day in quiet, thinking, thinking, reading, taking information in. I certainly spend a decent amount of time eating and doing other things, but I mean, some odd years ago, I would never considered that in order to excel, I'd need to be considering what's
Mm,
happening in the future, right? And I spend a lot of time in that space. I spend a lot of time asking the big questions, right? Where did we come from? And what is it that drives me, right?
mm.
Questioning emotion, questioning motive, those sorts of things. And it takes me I spend about 2 hours a day in this space.
Wow, wow, yeah. I could do more. I could do more of that for sure. So that's good. It doesn't surprise me. You're always, 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 always very thoughtful and purposeful. I want to go back to that conversation we were having around and that experience. By the way, we should have ended the show right there. I've never heard a better customer experience that good in a long time. Um, so we are in the middle of that change. Let's call it whatever, digital transformation, CX became a thing, all that. And we've not fully digested it. Case in point, you just told me what I was promised 10 years ago would be routine by now, right? That, you would call in, we will identify who you are, and there will be context and there will be all of this. Then I've been promised that for that. And that is still the exception. So, in a world where we have not digested the last sets of changes and we're still in the middle of that, and now you're talking about you and others, and these executives are talking about there's another one coming,
Yep.
right? It seems to me like we are in trouble. So, how do you sort of reconcile that the change is not slowing down? We've not digested the last one. We're not doing the last one well. Are we just going to muddle our way through? How do you react to that?
Yeah, very interesting. So I'd say some are doing it well, clearly,
Of course, yeah.
from the example, right? And if you we've sent out surveys to top CXOs to see who is in fact doing it well. What did they invest? What were their initial goals? Have they reached their goals, et cetera? And then the proof's in the pudding, right? You go and test it. The example that I provided, I provided it on purpose. It casts a vision for where
Mm,
we can go, right?
yes.
Effortless is
Yes.
is where we ought to be. I'll obviously purchase more of that product. So they won.
Of course. Like
The
I've never heard anything like that blow my mind.
so the I think one of the keys is in a recent learning that I had. I was listening to a podcast with a Harvard professor talk about mindfulness, and that we should adopt a mindset of uncertainty was the principle. And it was jarring for me because it brought me back to a transformation that we did. Actually, it's two transformations that we worked on a handful of years ago. Transforming the first one was an oil and gas servicing company, their finance and accounting business. Right. This is, if I talk in technical terms about it, I'll bore everyone, so I won't. But bottom line, it took quite a bit of lifting to map out the process because it's incredibly deep and intricate when you look at the missing invoice process or any of those sorts of things. We mapped it out, we automated it, spoke about it at Gardner, and 18 months later, we were sitting in front of someone that had heard the story that wanted to purchase the same thing. What they want. They wanted repeatability.
Yes.
Right? Let's stand on the shoulders of what you did there.
Give me that thing. I want that. That thing.
Give us that. We heard it worked great. Let's do that. And the reality is, we did. We sold them that, and we warned them that there are changes that will need to be made, even though we're using a number of the same systems. Right. The fact is that change is happening so rapidly. This is not step change anymore, that we need to be thoughtful about the fact that things aren't as repeatable as they used to be. And we need to question what we thought what we knew before, because we can't solve today's problems with yesterday's solutions. And so we ran into, on this specific implementation, multiple different roadblocks just because of new additions of software that came out, which weren't compatible anymore, which you would not have known for. So we have to plan for uncertainty and be comfortable with it. And frankly, when you don't do that and you don't set the budget for it, then the implementation fails, doesn't receive the right return on investment. You haven't likely developed the support within the organization. I'm talking about our customer that we work with as consultants. And then it's a project or program that fails. And we say the technology failed us, when in fact, really, it's not bad. It's poor planning.
Well, let me pull on that since you've gone there. So every organization now, they say they want to do digital transformation. Now they want to do AI, and they always hire the technologists to bring to this. What are we as corporate America never planning for when this comes in? Like, what? Just get to what do they usually miss?
That's an awesome question, an incredible mouthful. I'm going to just take a right turn, if you'll let me.
Please.
People.
Okay.
It's all about people, right? So at the top, right, the CEO level, the difficulty we have is, and you talk to CEOs, no matter what size organization. When I was in consulting, we were talking to the Fortune 100. Their big stressor is understanding, getting information, the truth, right? What is the reality about what's happening in the organization, right? And there are very senior level folks within the organization that have learned how to operate, how to manage career, and how to present information. So getting the truth is absolutely critical. And
can I stop you right there, because I think my head just exploded a little bit. So we've got the CEO of major or even mid-level organizations, and you're telling me they don't know what the hell's going on?
I'm telling you that you go 2 levels down, the people who are actually, because the CEO role, if you look at it, is that you certainly have the ability to make decisions, but you're doing that through a team of people often, and you hire some of the best people to put around you. There's different personality profiles that engage in the position, but you're also in the market, you're raising money, you're giving speeches. There's a different role that exists for the CEO than most expect that the job is. But the CEO is still, the buck stops there, and the CEO is still setting pace for where the organization is going to go. And as you sit in the boardroom, you're getting a story. And there's people that have been in careers for a long time, and you've been doing this for a while, and I've watched your astute ability to process the details about what's happening around you. The story isn't always the reality of what's really happening. And data and statistics we know can absolutely be manipulated all of the time. So yes, the obtaining the right information is critical. So what does that mean? It means the people that you put in place. And because this change is not a step change and your leadership a step below the CEO, they're under turmoil at this point as well. They're not just leading and bringing people to the next place, and it's a little bit unknown. It's totally and completely unknown. So what drives that? Often fear and other emotions. So making certain that the folks that are at that next level have the appropriate character in order to bring the organization to where we need to go is critical. And the reason that's important is that who's actually doing the work. Right? We know that it's those engineers attracting and bringing in that and keeping that talent is critical. So you need to make certain that we're developing an environment that will support the change, that will bring forward their ideas, that will support and help them grow. And we're doing that also with a whole new generation of people. Right. So leadership is critical, and leadership needs to be done a little bit differently, very likely, than it has been done in times past, we'll say.
What would you do differently in leadership? And we get the C-suite and on and on. Give us a little taste of. I feel like this might be radical.
It might be radical. I'm not certain it's entirely radical. It's just a bit different than it's been, right? So because our leaders haven't been there in the past. Let's say you were doing a CRM change before, or let's say you were, well, I mean, you can name, I won't name any organizations, right? But any specific technology project, the leaders that were on the team, say at the GM level or even the CIO level, those folks have been through many technology changes. So they know how to run a project, even a program. Okay. The fact that now everything is upside down and we're learning from the beginning. It's absolutely critical that the folks that are coming in earlier in their career that are learning quickly, that we can support those ideas, that we're not making the decision on what's happening at the top. So these leaders need to actually become collaborators and be when they're in a room, they need to be able to make the folks that are in the room comfortable to pull the information out. Then they need to be able to identify, because quickly they can make decisions. Leaders don't have an issue making a decision when they have information, but they don't have to be making all of them. We don't need to be dictating where we go. They should be collaborating with their teams, but then they have to switch hats back on to leader hat, right? It's very difficult to actually develop a team that has trust, that can collaborate like this, and that can grow folks' careers for leaders, especially leaders that haven't processed fear.
That's. I knew you were going to take us certain places. So I started a conversation about change in the world and AI being one of the biggest manifestation of that. And so when people think about most of what's driving the world, the consensus is technology. I think you have just made the case pretty firmly that really what's in the way, this is more about people than we think. It reminds me a little bit of I don't know if you're an Adler guy, and we're not going to do philosophy on this deal, but one of his mantras that always sticks to me says all human problems are interpersonal problems. And it takes you a while and then you go, yeah, because he basically goes, whatever it is, if you take other human beings out of the equation, most of those problems kind of go away. So to that end, you have done something similar and made this moment we're in also about people. So say more about that. You've used certain words which I don't hear a lot in the corporate world around fear and emotion. Say more about why you've chosen to make people and leadership at the center of.
You bet. You bet. So two things. There's actually two relatively easy concepts to to wrap our brains around. The first is the concept of change, or entropy. Both of these are the things that actually are the catalyst of stress for people. Unknown is what the catalyzer of stress. Now, if you choose to engage in something that's unknown, that's actually an energizer, and develops curiosity, and positive energy develops from it. So that's a behavior that we want to support.
Right.
But if you don't choose to, and it's put on you, the stress develops typically a fear response. So that's the first concept, is change. And change is happening everywhere, and it's happening actually quicker than it's happened in the past. And it actually is happening quicker. I won't bore everyone with research on it, but we'll just say it's increasing in rate, right? It's not slowing down. So every year it's quicker and quicker. There's actually a curve that they've developed where at the knee of the curve, it's turned near straight up at this point. Okay, so change is the first. The second, and we'll go academic for just a moment, there was a Russian psychologist, Lev, and I forget his last name. It was like Vygotsky or so. And he developed what's called the zone of proximal development. And he basically identified that there's this, and we've talked about it in business, there's this place of challenge at which you're growing, there's stress, but positive stress, and you actually get the best value out of it. So the goal is, how do we get to this place where we're not stressing people to the point at which they shut down, but to a point at which there's growth. And one of the key elements, so everyone gets that, but the piece that folks forget is that within the zone of proximal development, the critical step is to be providing support and training, mentoring, and leadership. And the issue that exists today is that if our leaders are going through change that they're uncertain about, they're not able to even provide that often. So there's this missing ingredient that exists. Now, if they process it, they push into what they process their feelings, right? I long ago was taught the principle of lead as it relates to feelings. Listen to them, examine them, and then you make a decision. Don't let the feeling make a decision for you. So if our leaders are actually engaging in that and they realize, hey, there's uncertainty, they can actually bring it back and collaborate with the team and pull back the onion on uncertainty. There's folks that are on the team, multiple minds together, engaged in solving something, actually makes you more powerful. That's where the trust comes in. We've got an actual team that's engaging at a very high level at this point. And then we cast a vision to solve and move forward. I think that's often what's missing.
Man. I just, there's a couple of things I jotted down. I think this whole part of, I never connected the dots that in our typical hierarchical world where the most senior people are driving the change, ironically, it's the most new early in career folks who are probably closer to the change, more comfortable with the change, understand a little bit better. And while we have some lanes of communication, I think we may have been stunting ourselves the whole time if you're not thoughtful about this. If you are handing the keys to your future to someone who is scared out of their minds, I can't imagine, without arming them with the other tools and collaboration to make that. I think that part really resonated with me.
And look, they're scared in a bold way, right? Most of these folks don't
yes,
come across as scared.
right,
They come across like they have all of the ideas, and that's actually the piece that becomes the red flag, right? Leaders need to be able to, in contrast, develop foster a teamwork environment, support people's ideas, because they have to develop trust. If you're taking the ideas, right, in building your career, you're not actually building a team that has trust and will collaborate, right? So yes, you'll be there for a long time probably, and they then build this positive engine in order to innovate, and that's really what we're trying to do. And that there's something a bit selfless in that, in order to get to adding value at that level. Now, here's the thing, right? Let's not forget the white elephant in the room, because the leaders are also have a competing interest within the organization to manage reputation, their influence, power, right, and all the levers that enable them to continue to lead. So there's different hats they need to wear. They need to decide in a wise way how to craft so that they can both support the folks on their team, but also manage their career appropriately. These exist. It cuts both directions.
So much there. I wanna ask you a question that will allow my audience to get to know you a little bit. I ask guests, what is a purchase under $50 that you consider life changing or game changing? Right? Let's not get all Pachai and hyperbolic. Uh, but for me, it's the neti pot. For those who do not know what the heck that is, so it's for if you suffer from allergies, you're taking the drugs and all of that. But when things get bad enough, you buy something on a neti pot. It looks like a teapot. You put water, saline water in it. You pour it up one nostril, and it goes in up your fin and comes out the other nostril. There's uh, a, a, a lady on the box. She is doing the thing ever so beautifully and elegantly. The water goes in, it comes out. When I do it, I end up waterboarding myself on my sink. I'm nearly, I'm nearly drowning of my own snot. It's not the pretty sight. But when things get really bad, this under $20 thing is a life changer for me. So, Joe, what is your thing under $50 of the rules that you would say, man, this thing really impacts my life in a good way?
It's a great question. I love these get to know you questions. The first thing that came to mind was the Philips toothbrush, but I'm not going to go with it. I wanted to say it because you feel like you left the dentist every time you use it. But I've heard it said, I've heard it used multiple times, right? So I'm going to say, and I'll tell it in a story.
Yeah.
I was with my daughter at a jewelry show.
That sounds over $50.
It was an uncomfortable experience. You can expect that. This is going to end in such a comfortable place, though. I don't know if you've been to these jewelry shows. You've got booths with folks trying to sell you diamonds and gold and et cetera. And on the side, there are vendors selling all different sorts of stuff. And I'll do a timeout in the story. If you will allow me the colloquialism, the other side of the pillow, right? I walked past a vendor that provided me, and I made a purchase that the vendor provided me with a forever other side of the pillow. We bought bamboo sheets, and the cold on the other side of the pillow, I treasure. And we bought these bamboo sheets, and I didn't think much of it. I brought them home, and they're always cold.
That is, I need that. I am a sweater. I'm always hot. So bamboo sheets.
Yeah.
Are they under $50 though?
So I mean,
Okay.
these were $99 when I bought them. This is 10 years ago.
Awesome.
I wish I had the name brand, because my wife has purchased a few sets since that were even, I think, a little bit more pricey. That we bought them when they were rare, if you will. I hadn't seen them in stores, and the newer ones aren't. For whatever reason, they work, but they work for a year. I think they may be designed
to get their SaaS product.
The SaaS
you
product.
You gotta subscribe.
It's yearly.
So getting back to our topic, what are you advising clients to do and to prepare so that this time would be different and more effective?
Yeah, it's an outstanding question, and it's interesting because as we sit in the room, it's the question that comes up by some of the more astute leaders, right? Okay, great. We know what you've done before. Your deck was wonderful. We've heard the pitch, but what have you learned before that you don't want to repeat? And how can we do better than what you've done? We don't just want to capitalize on the value that was added. And it's a reoccurring theme Okay. So the first thing that I advise is that you internally obtain collaboration and support for the program. Okay.
Okay.
So if you're out on the limb and you're risking, because we're the change where we're at in the change cycle, that in the fact that you're going to need to spend some time doing the integrations and you're going to spend some time building a center of excellence. If your initial project has to receive all your ROI, you probably have an issue. So you don't have enough support internally. So I'm telling them, number one, you should collaborate and get support internally. By the way, it depends on who asks this question. I'm telling this to folks, we'll say a level below the sea level.
Okay. Yeah.
If you're at the sea level, which
Yeah.
often is the buyer, and we're often at that space, I raise this question a step and I say, plan for enterprise-wide change. Okay. Put together an entire program plan. Don't engage in a plan to change just for now. You want to change for 36 months out, because everything's going to change in 18 months. So if you expect you're going to change things and then we're going to temporarily change it and then we're going to replug it in a year and a half from now, you're going to spend a significantly larger amount of money. And across your entire enterprise, you want to know what is repeatable, what are the systems that you're ultimately going to be sunsetting. And so you should have a role within the C-level that reports to the CEO that's responsible for change across the enterprise and developing. That's the first thing. And then a level down, it's make sure that you've got the support that you need. And then finally, the third is make certain that you actually do put a plan together that's not just based on cost reduction, that's based on what your return on investment will be, okay, and what your service gains will be. Cost reduction is boilerplate. It should be absolutely and completely expected. But if you're not increasing service and you're not hitting a couple other critical key performance indicators and keeping your staff, you'll cease to be relevant.
I can't help by, I know I'm coming up on time, but I want to ask you this question while I've got you, and you've got to come back. Why is the people part, which you just said is where this whole thing goes to die? Why doesn't, at least in my experience, most organization are not as thoughtful on this side? There's lots of money being spent on the tech, on the this and that, but they tend to, it's almost like they're shying away from it. But if the evidence is so overwhelming, why, in your opinion, do you think we as an industry have not spent the appropriate time and seriousness around people and leadership?
It's an incredible question. I love the depth of the questions that you ask. I'm going to answer this question outside the box. All right. You can answer the question the same way about why, whether you where you stand on environmental issues. Why are we not engaged in, and have we not thoughtful and appropriate plans in order to keep things in a way that's sustained?
Right.
So we're focused on the short term.
Yeah.
Right. And what's incentivized is what's driving behavior. And so one of the other, I think, critical changes that needs to take place is we look at how are we incentivizing people, and is it aligned to what we're trying to ultimately achieve?
Yeah. I mean, look, the Warren Buffett famously said, the read the incentive plan and you know everything you need to know about the company. So spot on. Joe, before I let you go, I've got again, folks, we're gonna post his info or his LinkedIn, and you can check him out and engage with Joe. But I've got another question to help folks get to know you. I found out that wrestling was a fake sport in college. It's quite it was a moment for me. Like, it broke my heart. I mean, Iron Sheik was my guy, and Ulk was the man then, and so I find out this whole thing is choreographed. No, I really thought these people were getting hurt and sent to the hospital and all of these things. So now that I've shared that, what did you find out? What mysteries of life did you find were not what you thought, maybe later in life than you would have liked?
Yeah, this is yeah. You really try to last bear. Great question. I was enjoying lunch at um, a Michelin hot dog stand. They don't. They don't.
An out of work Michelin
Right.
chef
Nope, they
opened
don't.
a hot dog stand. What,
And,
$20 hot dogs?
nope. Yeah, there was $599 hot dog. I'm with a dear friend, and we're sharing a meal, and I've got my sacred French fries with me,
Yeah.
and we're at my favorite place, and these were the fresh pressed kind, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
that's my favorite, right? And they're sacred, right? I always say, a few things in life are sacred, quoting a TV show, among them a man's fries. And so as we ate the French fries, my friend decided to drop the truth bomb on me that, these aren't actually made. They were never created by the French. And I didn't believe it. He's often sarcastic. So I dug my heels in. Like, I know pizza wasn't created by, nor pasta by the Italians. It's my
Right.
lineage. If he just said that, I went along. But I knew this was sarcastic. And by the way, this was 18 months ago. So this is very embarrassed. And I went home and I researched it. I came to learn that actually the Belgium that created French fries in the 1680s. Actually, potatoes 1748 to 1772 were illegal in France. So the French fries would have been even legal to eat during. Not only didn't they.
Oh my gosh, I learned so much today. And it makes our whole calling the thing freedom fries so ridiculous now. Now that
It's true.
it does make
Makes
that
me want to
silly.
dip them in chocolate.
That is awesome. Well, we're about at a time. When we leave, I'd like to leave you with the last word. For me, we leave people with something I read or learned. I'm reading a book about historical books on my new fan, and this one goes into the 1800s. And what I didn't realize was the electric car was the most popular car in the United States. And in fact, this gasoline powered thing was such an underdog, it was a foregone conclusion we were all going to be driving electric cars. And if you see the quotes about battery ranges, about all of this, almost identical. And it was by sheer circumstance that Henry Ford and the production, he jumped ahead of the electric car and with production, and then the rest, as they say, is history. But
Wow.
it was so inevitable that electric cars was going to be in our future. I share that for humility for all of us and people who try to get in the prediction business, that it's not just the technology or the this. A lot of things need to go well. And so today, Joe, I'm thankful you came on because this topic that can be a black box for most around leadership and people, it's one that you spend a lot of time in as well as being in technology. So this is very insightful. But that story sticks with me that we should approach things with humility. I'll leave you the last word, Joe.
Very good. Thank you. First off, thanks so much for having me. I've wanted to do this with you for so long. I'll always work
Thanks for coming.
time out of my calendar, my busy calendar for you. You're one of my favorite people. It's been such a pleasure these last few years, getting to know you, being able to spend time, and this was wonderful to be able to share some thoughts and with some folks. I think what I'll leave folks with maybe ties back to some of what we talked about. There's a book that I read as we consider next steps about leadership and how do I manage myself thought. There was a book called The Anatomy of Peace. by the
Anatomy of
Arbinger
peace.
Institute, right? And
Okay.
the Arbinger Institute was developed by a guy from, I believe, Israel and another guy from, I think it was Pakistan. And either way, they were from warring regions. They have interesting backgrounds. And they created this institute to push peace. They're actually pushing peace these days. But they have this institute to help families and relationships, but they're doing it on a global level as well. And the book talks about how every thought that we process as we engage interpersonally with people, we come at it with a heart of conflict or war, or a heart of peace, and how we can actually process, we choose how we think, and then invite people by the words we use into peace. Even in fact, we're engaging in conflict, we can do so in even the hardest conflicts at a heart of peace. Incredibly profound. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's a good place to leave it. And I'm going to check out that book. Joe, this has been awesome. And to our listeners and viewers, until next time, take care of yourself. And if you can, each other. Talk soon. You've been listening to an Amos Talks production.